Welcome to the latest episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. In this episode, my guest and I will be talking about the parade track, Another Lover Hole in Your Head. Joining me is first-time guest Rhonda Nicole. Welcome to the show, Rhonda.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Jason. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited to have you as well. A new guest. It's been a while since I've had a brand new guest that had never been on an episode before. So since this is your first time on the show, can you please give the listeners a brief bio on yourself and maybe speak to your connection to Prince's music for a second?
Sure, I'd love to. I am originally from Dallas, Texas, born and raised there. And I currently live in LA. I've been here for a couple of years. And I am a singer, a songwriter, composer, and a producer. I am a music journalist and also a social and digital media marketing executive consultant, whatever word you want to use. So I've always had my hands in a bunch of different pots creatively, and I'm grateful for that. And I, of course, like so many others, especially who work in music, I cite Prince and related artists as being my biggest inspirations. I started listening to him on my own, sort of autonomously, in '84 when I was 9 because of Purple Rain. But because I had an older sister at home who a little bit before that, would have her radio on, I would hear songs like Controversy, where I thought he was saying, catch up with me. And I thought it was a woman singing because, of course, I was very young at the time and had no concept of falsetto. And then, of course, when 1999 came out and Little Red Corvette in particular was on the radio a lot, I remember hearing that. But it wasn't until Purple Rain. And definitely, I know that I got into the music in '84, with the release of the record of the movie. I didn't see the movie until the following summer when I would sneak and watch it on HBO at my grandparents' house. So that era, '84, '85 is when I really started to get into his music. And of course, everything that was happening in, the Prince universe at that time. So of course I was also into the time, and I was into Apollonia 6, and I had Vanity. I think by that time I had the Vanity 6 album on cassette, and had begun trying to collect other pieces of his discography up to that point, which proved to be challenging at that age because my parents were like, ma'am, no, give me that. So, like I vividly remember when I turned 12, my older sister bought me the 1999 album on cassette because up to that point I hadn't had it, and my mom made me take it back to the record store. And at that point, I'm like, okay, now I'm like almost a teenager. Come on, but she made me take it back. But I think it probably goes without saying that on some random mall excursion without my mother, I got it again, and I just learned how to hide my stuff until, she and my dad kind of stopped pushing against it. Because what was interesting too is that I think because I was also in music, I had been taking piano for a very long time. I was in choir. So I think that at least my dad had started to kind of get that there was something else happening with me with listening to that. Even though he was still a little bit concerned about the lyrical content, which most of it went over my head, there was a musical component that I was really starting to become enamored with, and I would talk to my dad about it. My dad was also a musician, so I think that kind of got me a pass, even though still there was some questionable conversations happening within the songs, again, because I didn't really get it. I don't think that they were as stressed about it as they had been. But so that's kind of how I got into Prince. And stayed with him. I never, ever, ever went through a period where I wasn't listening to Prince. And I actually told a friend recently, I was like, when everybody else in our age range, in our generation, was falling in love with hip hop, I never did, because I had already fallen in love with Prince's music. And there just kind of wasn't anything else that would satisfy me in that space. Even having been a big Michael Jackson fan up to 1984, I did not like Michael Jackson. I just lost interest. And so it's like, I was aware of all of these other, incredible musicians that we had, at least oral access to back then, and, through music videos and so forth. But Prince was really the one that just kind of sealed the deal for me in terms of where my attention and my passions would go for the rest of my life, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. It's an interesting background, interesting story. Thank you for sharing. And I think that while you were speaking on your history with Prince and his music, I was thinking, wow, that's okay. That's like identical to my experience, or I had a very similar upbringing. I mean, I think we've shared this information prior, but I think we're pretty much the exact same age, more or less. I mean, yeah. I was 9 in '84. Purple Rain was my era. I was clearly aware of his music prior to that, with 1999, Little Red Corvette being successes, and I had an older sister as well that kind of introduced me to his music, not on purpose, just by living in the same house as somebody who was listening to it. I just listened to it by default as well. But Purple Rain was not a movie that I saw in theaters. I snuck a viewing off of HBO, just like you did.
Yes.
But instead of my grandmother's house, it was a friend that lived down the street who had HBO. We didn't have HBO in our house, but he did. So we all were very interested, being preteen boys, in Purple Rain and all of what it had to offer us at that age. But the music stuck with me, and I was also a huge Michael Jackson fan. I was obsessed with Thriller until Purple Rain came about, and then it was like, oh, okay, I like this more. This speaks to me more, and I don't know, I can't verbalize why, I can't articulate why, but I like it more. And also with Prince, no knock on Michael Jackson, but he just kept releasing new music all the time. It's like you're not even done with Purple Rain yet, and you see a video for Raspberry Beret, which is off of the next album, and then you're barely getting into Raspberry Beret and the Around the World in a Day album. And that's what, now he's got a new album. It's called Parade, and it's got this song called Kiss, and he released several albums before, like at least 3, maybe even 4. I don't know the exact timing of the releases of Sign of the Times and Bad, but a lot of music in between Thriller and Bad. And yes. So when you're a child, like 5 years is an eternity. And so 5 years had passed between 1982 and 1987. And if you're talking like just, when Thriller was huge in 1983 with Billie Jean and Beat It, that's 4 years. And that's, like I said, it's an eternity when you're a kid. And I didn't completely lose all of my interest in Michael Jackson. I was still into Bad, but it wasn't the same. It just wasn't the same. I thought it was cool and I was into it, but I did not have the same connection to it anymore, because I had found Prince, and I'd also found other music as well that I was really getting into. I think the one difference between you and I that I noticed is that I did get into hip hop very early on. It was just it was kind of like that music that the previous generation just didn't understand. Mm-hmm. And something about it was appealing to me. And I couldn't, again, explain why. I didn't hardly have any friends that was into it. I had one friend that was really into it with me. But I still stuck with Prince, throughout much of the 90s until I went to college. And then I did have a period where I wasn't listening to his music quite as much, because in college I started experimenting with all sorts of different kinds of music, and it was almost like overload. Like, okay, all this classic rock I never heard, I gotta get into. All this classic soul I gotta get into. All this alternative music that was really big in the 90s I gotta start getting into, and I just didn't have enough room for it all, I guess would be my excuse. But I came back to it, so here we are.
Yes. Yes.
And
I love that.
today we're going to be talking about a song off of the Parade album. So,
Yes.
Another Lover Hole in Your Head, which was a single. It was the third and final U.S. released single off the album. Didn't make really any kind of a splash on the Billboard pop charts here in the U.S. And it was actually the fourth single released off the album in the U.K. because Girls and Boys was an official release in the UK, while that didn't get a release here in the United States. I think Girls and Boys would have been a good single choice, but for whatever reason, the record label did not choose to do that here in the United States. Another interesting fact about Another Lover Hole in Your Head, besides the fact that it was a single that nobody hardly remembers was a single, is that it was recorded in December of '85, meaning that it was recorded after the Under the Cherry Moon film was already done, had already completed all of its filming. That movie filmed in early fall of '85. So kind of like When Doves Cry to Purple Rain, it was written and recorded after the movie. It's kind of like just another song to add to the soundtrack, and then maybe another song to score a scene, but it wasn't written with the movie in mind ahead of time. It was after the fact. So just kind of another interesting parallel. Prince does that with his movies. Movie soundtracks, he'll have songs that he records with the intention of being performed in the movie, or keeping in mind like the plot of the movie. Like I think of songs like "Do You Lie" and of course "Under the Cherry Moon." Those kinds of songs that clearly have the lyrics point to pieces of the plot of the film, but Another Lover Hole in Your Head, not really as much. I mean, if this song wasn't on a movie soundtrack, like, and it didn't really have a very prominent role in the film. I know it's in there, but it doesn't have a prominent role. And to me, it's not one of those songs that I immediately think of Under the Cherry Moon. I just don't, and that's just maybe my bias. But so what do you like about the song? Before we get into the lyrics, Rhonda, you picked the song. Sounds like you really enjoy it, as do I.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Are you able to kind of explain or articulate what you like about the song?
Yeah, so it's interesting just to go back to what you were saying about its positioning in the film, because for whatever bizarre reason, I have been craving watching Under the Cherry Moon recently, and I've seen the movie about 16 billion times. Summer of '86, and I was on my way into sixth grade, so I was going to start playing sax. But it was that video and watching Eric Leeds up close and seeing him and hearing that the audacity of the lyrics. Again, even listening to I talk a little trash here, like can't nobody do what I do.
There's the interplay between his vocals and Susanna's vocals, but you have also vocals from the men on the side. You've got Jerome and Wally and Brooks doing their background vocals, and we've got also there's string or orchestration on this song that kind of gets buried a little bit. I mean, I can hear it, and I definitely notice it now because I'm paying attention to it. I'm like, okay, there's the Claire Fisher Orchestra. But yeah, it's like the whole kitchen sink is in this song, but it doesn't sound busy. It's a cool song for that reason, and it's not overly long. I mean, yeah, there's a 12-inch version out there that's, as you talked about, which is usually the way to go. But from a lyrical standpoint, there's really not much added.
Definitely.
All right, so if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get to the lyrics.
Yes.
So the first verse goes, I gave my love, I gave my life, I gave my body and mind. We were inseparable. Why can't you learn to play the game? Baby, don't you know that you need more? And that's the first verse. So where's he coming from? Where's Prince coming from? He's coming from a place where he's in a relationship and he feels like he has fully committed to this relationship. And something that has kind of caused a rift between them, and he's kind of putting the blame on that other person, really, because he's essentially saying, I've done everything that I can to make this work, but now you're pleading insanity and you can't play the game and you need more, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what is that kind of what you get from the verse, or do you have any additional things you want to talk about with this one?
No, definitely get that. And it's interesting because I've been kicking around a theory. I know that one of the things that we tend to love to do in the Prince world is try to extract from lyrics who or what the song might be about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a whole podcast that dedicates to that, to discussions
exactly.
about that.
I mean,
so.
like, and there's, there's on the one hand, there are things that he might have alluded to in his lifetime. There are certainly people who believe something is about them, and it might be that like several different people think that one song is about all of them, and that's fully possible. And it's also possible that it's about none of them. But something that stands out to me in this lyric makes me wonder. I have no proof of this at all, but I wonder if this is a song. First of all, I know that he recorded it in '85, but as we know with Prince, he could have written it at any period prior to that. Mm-hmm. And which brings me to wonder, could this be a song, for example, that may have been inspired by his relationship with Vanity? I think a lot of songs from a particular era that may have been ascribed later on to someone else in terms of inspiration might be, something that are either holdovers from that relationship and that time in his life, or it just inspired. But it's the whole, I gave my love, I gave my life, I gave my body and mind. That makes me wonder, there obviously we know that he's had lots of really interesting relationships and romantic pairings, about which I think he's probably written most, if not all, on some level, whether we know it or not. But this song, because of where it falls in his discography, it makes me curious, like it could certainly have been something, because lyrically, to your point earlier, it doesn't really fit with the movie. Christopher Tracy and Mary Sharon characters had a very short love affair. Honestly, it was like a few days. It was kind of very Romeo and Juliet, if you think about it. So it's not as though it's a long in the tooth story of a couple that fits within the narrative of the movie, so much as it feels like a song that comes from some other space in his creative life and in his personal life. But definitely those lyrics trigger that thought for me, and have for a while. That I was just like, it feels, the song obviously falls during the Susanna era, if you will. But is it a song that is truly inspired in that moment, or is it one that comes from someplace else? And that certainly is something that I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting theory. And I say that because I think that there's a lot of misinformation about the reasons why Prince and Vanity's relationship ended. I guess it depends on who you ask, or it depends on what you decide is true, or whose version of the truth you trust is what you're going to take away. Because I've heard things from Prince cheating. I've heard things from she wanted too much money to be in Purple Rain. I've heard from she was cheating. It's basically like, just about anything, you could attribute to that. I mean, what we know, all we really know is that Vanity was originally pegged to be in Purple Rain to play, to take, the character that ended up going to Apollonia, but then she wasn't. And that's really all, because I've heard that even maybe the whole money thing isn't even 100% true. I don't know what to believe, and until somebody who was there puts their, because unfortunately the two could probably tell us the truth, or at least their version of the truth, and that's the other thing. Prince tells his story and Vanity tells their story. Doesn't mean either one of them are 100% the truth. But anyway,
But
I
now
guess
they
what
are
I'm trying to
somewhere
say.
together having those conversations.
Yeah, it's
You
like, well, why
know?
didn't you want to be in my movie?
Imagine.
It's like, why didn't you pay me enough? Or there
Exactly.
could be, it should be, likely it's way more complicated than even that.
I'm
If I had to
sure.
guess, it's probably a combination of things. But anyway, so I find it interesting because then I'm looking at these lyrics again, and it does seem like the way he's singing this first verse, he seems taken aback by the situation that he finds this relationship in. He just feels like maybe somebody who's frustrated or somebody who is just trying to understand exactly what went wrong.
Hmm.
Now you plead insanity. I mean, is that like a metaphor for saying that the person he's referring to doesn't know what they really want? Is that kind of like a metaphor for that? Saying you're pleading insanity is another way of saying you don't really know what you want. I don't know. That's kind of what I think, but it could certainly somebody else might take those lines to mean something else. And why can't you learn to play the game? Interesting line. To
Hmm.
play the game. Play the game meaning like, why can't you learn to just, you know, play the dutiful role of superstar girlfriend? you know, I don't know. I mean, you
Or
just never
whatever
know.
we've decided that this is, because it also seems like he's like having a conversation with someone who has decided that she wants something different,
Yeah.
and so he's like, kind of in the sense of, if two people are in a relationship and one decides that they want to take it to the next level, whatever that next level is, and the other one is saying, well, no, why can't we just keep it the way it is? Hence, why can't you learn to play the game? In which case, in his case, he's saying you need more. So it's possible that, the other person wants less, or I want something different, and it's not what you're
Hmm.
trying to give me, whatever that is. And it's interesting too, because it is, to your point, in the verse, he's very plaintive. He's like, I've given you everything, and now you want something different. And then in the chorus, he gets a little bit more assertive. Like, you need another lover, like you need a hole in your head. Like, it's a really interesting way that I think Prince has always been able to tell a story without casting himself as either a victim or a villain. And of course, it's not necessarily that the song is autobiographical, but when we think of it, it's him giving us the narrative, whatever character it is that's in that space. But
Hmm.
he does some really interesting things with creating the sense of empathy around these characters, whether you believe that it's autobiographical and it's first person, or he made up a story about some people that he saw walking down the street. Who knows? But he does a really interesting job and a beautiful job of making you feel like at any given time, this song could apply to anybody. It could be about me. I can feel this way about somebody I'm dating, or they could feel this way about me. But there's that tension that always makes for a compelling love story, regardless, and I think that this song is an excellent example of that from a lyrical perspective.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the chorus. You need another lover like you need a hole in your head. You know there ain't no other that can do the duty in your bed. Okay, so I mean, the first line is where we get our title. So he basically takes that line, "You need another lover like you need a hole in your head," and smushes it together into one word: "Another lover hole in your head." That's the name of the song. That's the name of the song.
Yes.
There's no spaces in it, and he has to take out some letters in order to make it kind of flow and look cool. But yeah, so to your point, he's now basically saying, or at least what I'm getting from now the chorus after singing the verse is you kind of get now the picture that she's either leaving him or in the process of leaving him for somebody else. It's not like I don't get the feeling that he would say these lines if she was just leaving. Like, I need some time to myself, or I need to be alone and away from you. No, it sounds like she's leaving him for somebody else. You need another lover like you need a hole in your head, which is to say, of course, you don't need one at all because nobody needs a hole in their head, right? So that's just,
Exactly.
I mean, that line, you need fill in the blank, like you need a hole in your head. It's not something that it's not a term or a turn of phrase that I use a lot, but I've heard it before, before this song and after the song.
Yeah.
Like I need another, whatever. I need another podcast. Like I need a hole in my head. No, I don't need another one. This one takes up enough time. So, but of course, then he has to throw in that, there ain't no other that can do the duty in your bed, because Prince likes to brag a little bit about his
Yes.
sexual prowess and his abilities in the bedroom, and this isn't clearly not the first time he's done that. It isn't the last. Won't be the last, that is. But just in case, anybody was interested as to why he's trying to sell himself and try to sell what he has to offer, that's one of the things that he's offering here in the chorus.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
yeah, that's the chorus in essence. And, the way it's sung with the background vocals. So it's, you kind of get, I hear everybody's vocals when I hear the song in my head, the chorus in my head. I hear Prince's vocals, I hear Susanna's vocals, probably Wendy's as well. And I just like how it's performed. It's very simple, easy to sing along to, and catchy. It's really catchy.
It's very catchy for an artist who didn't always do catchy, because he was doing so many other things. I mean, to your point, it's easy to sing along with. And I can't think of a lot of Prince songs that immediately resonate in that way. That, the tail end of Purple Rain, where everybody's singing the ooze, where if when you go see Prince live in concert, everyone starts it too early, and I'm always like, no guys, like, count it. This is why musicians are not fun to go to concerts with. This is like, first of all, you're off pitch. Secondly, you're early. But those kinds of things in music are unifying, because even if you don't know the rest of the words, there's always that one part of the song. So even if you don't know all the words to Another Lover Hole in Your Head, you can either sing the chorus, or you can just wait till the baby, because there's that little tag that makes it easy for everyone to kind of get involved. But here's something that I wonder too, as we're thinking about the chorus, as we compare it to that first verse. Because I also wonder if in the narrative of the story that he's telling in this song, if it's not so much that she's trying to leave for someone else, but bring somebody else in. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
In which case,
Interesting.
it also kind of turns the chorus on its ear, because, there is a space where Prince is singing, definitely is giving us material where he is absolutely down with doing a whole lot of things with a whole lot of people at the same time. But then there are also moments where he's very clear that he's only focused on this person. And so perhaps this is a situation where this other person is trying to be focused on too many people. And he's like, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not the game we're playing. I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah.
obviously open for interpretation, but given the fact that, again, the song doesn't necessarily fit into the larger arc of the Cherry Moon storyline, it would be an interesting thing to consider, that maybe there's a lot more happening behind the scenes lyrically than we even realize, regardless as to how many times we've listened to this song. Just
Yeah.
throwing that out there.
Yeah, I like that. Thinking outside the box, Rhonda. Appreciate that perspective. Because, yeah, you could absolutely take it that way. Like, eating another lover. Like, do we need another lover in our life?
Is there enough space in this relationship for another person? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. It's like, if you're gonna bring him in for bedroom stuff, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, nobody can do it like me. So
Yeah, like, I've pretty much got that covered. What else?
Let's nip that in the bud right now. Good point. Okay, so let's move on to the second verse. And actually, this song really only has, in essence, two verses.
Mm-hmm.
Because after the second verse is a lot of just kind of repeating some of the lines from the song background. But the second verse is interesting because while the first verse is sung very straightforward, typical, single voice, the second verse is where there's a lot of the interplay between his vocals and Susanna and or Wendy's. I forget if it's both of them or if it's just Susanna's.
I think it's mostly
Regardless.
Susanna.
Okay, so thanks for clarifying that. But yeah, it's certainly where you get that, where he almost like pauses to let her vocals have some room to breathe and to be able to listen to. And the way it's sung and structured is different. So the lines are, "We were brothers and sisters, united all for love. Now all of a sudden you try to fight it. You say you've had enough. Even though we had big fun, you want another someone. Yo, happily ever after be. Sure as there's sun, I'm gonna be the one, and if you don't understand face to face, baby, I'll tell you down on my knees." And I did not recite all of the lines that are being sung in the background because they're really just kind of repeating, echoing the lines that he's saying, just, not right behind him, but after, like basically an echo in essence. So with those lines, the way they're sung and the way they're delivered, it does make it more complex. It makes a more complex listen, because I don't know. For me personally, I have a harder time when Prince has done this multiple times, and I've expressed it in other episodes where like he has his vocals and then he has, either Susanna or Wendy or Lisa or somebody on the background doing echoing vocals, and then it's like my ears almost have to like focus on one set or the other. But when I'm trying to just like really focus and pay attention, when I'm just listening to it, I can let all that go and I can just enjoy the back and forth and listen to it probably the way most people listen to it and the way it's meant to be listened to. But when you're trying to dissect lyrics for a podcast, you kind of gotta take a little deeper dive. But with this second chorus or second verse, Rhonda, what point sticks out to you? What do you like about this verse?
First of all, I think it's one of the most interestingly written sets of lyrics. Not only because of the contrast that you just pointed out between how it's structured compared to the first verse, but it's so conversational. And because I don't know if I feel that it's conversational just because of the lyrical content itself or because of how the vocals are produced for it. But I've always thought that it's such an interesting set of words in a song. And as a songwriter who has a tendency to overwrite, verses get very long, trying to get to the point, it's something that I admire because there's a lot of storytelling happening in this section. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit longer and a little bit more intricate than the first, but there's still just this really interesting storytelling. And so one of the things that I love is, that it starts out with the line, we were brothers and sisters. And because Prince always had such an interesting way that he categorized even romantic relationships, think back to I want to be a lover, I want to be a mother and sister, and it's like he really had this almost obsession, I guess, with quantifying love or categorizing and characterizing love between lovers as being as intimate and urgent and necessary as the love that you feel in a familial space. And so to address a lover as, we were brothers and sisters and we were united and now you trying to change it all. Again, he's going back to what he was talking about in the first verse, like, why can't you learn to play the game? This is what we said we were doing. And now here you are trying to go in a different direction. But the first verse felt like he was a little bit more defensive. The second verse really feels like he's like, okay, listen, I'm trying to make this work. And I'm trying to understand, and I want to hear you. I need you to hear me. But I can't lose you. the second verse feels more like, okay, now I'm taking off the armor and I'm really just trying to be vulnerable, and I want you to hear and see my heart.
Yeah.
That's what the second verse always gives me chills, because I love the way that it's written, both musically and lyrically. I love the way it's performed, but I also just love the energy behind it. I very much relate to that sense of desperation isn't the word, but just that sense of I gotta preserve this thing that I have with this person. And so whatever I need to do or say, I'm just gonna go that way, and maybe stop trying to, be the boss of it. I don't know. It's a really compelling verse. And then you get to the end where he's like, if you don't understand face to face, I'm getting on my knees, And so is he about to propose, or is he just begging? Either
Right.
way,
Exactly.
it's so dramatic, and just it's great, because it's like, yes, he's like, okay, fine. He's surrendering in that sense, even though he's also still, touting his prowess and being like, you're never going to find anyone else like me. But he's also very much surrendering in that moment, and I love that.
Yeah. There's nothing in this verse that even like uh, goes against or directly opposes your alternate theory that this other lover, this another lover, is potentially just an addition to what already exists, not like a replacement, but an addition. Because he says in here, "You want another someone."
Mm-hmm.
That's vague enough that it can really be applied to just about anything. And and I echo your sentiments on this verse. This is the interesting verse of the two, the more interesting verse of the two, easily. And it's very vulnerable. It's super vulnerable the way he starts it off, talking about, saying somebody was united, we were united like brothers and sisters. That's a pretty damn strong bond that he's kind of, painting a picture that they had to the listener. And you're trying to fight it. You say you've had enough. Okay, we don't really know why. So we're just getting the one side of it again, like we do in most songs by any artist. You're getting one side for the most part. So all we can do is listen to him kind of beg and plead and express like a serious frustration, but also desperation for the resolution of this situation that they're finding themselves in. He wants her to make a choice, me or this other person. And if I have to get down on my knees, and I like how you said it could either be begging or a proposal, because originally I was thinking begging, like I'm going to get down on my knees and beg you. But the more I read it, the more I looked at it, the more I listened to it, like, does he think that proposing is going to resolve this? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a risky proposition to assume that putting a
Yeah.
ring on it is going to take away all of the reasons why this person feels like they need another lover, someone else as he calls it. So it's a bold move, but I think that the way he expresses the lyrics in this verse certainly tell me that he's feeling like he's on his last. This is like his last option.
Yes.
Like, it's either this or it's not going to work.
And I think too, because Prince historically has always been, as an artist, someone who doesn't ever seem to shy away from expressing difficult feelings, whether that's anger or rage or, deep sadness, whatever it is. It's never just a happy-go-lucky, everything is sunshiny. There's always something else that he's willing to push. And even in the same song, and this is a perfect example of a song where he's going back and forth between being like, listen, I'm the bomb. Like, no one else is going to give you the satisfaction I give you, but please don't leave me. Like, whereas
Mm-hmm.
with a different kind of artist, it may have been just one or the other. It would have been just all the begging and please don't leave me, or just all, the bravado and all of the too muchness, the heavy on the testosterone and nothing else. And he just is so great at bringing all of those things together and showing you this really compassionate and human way that we all seem to experience relationships, regardless as to what kinds of involvements we're in, whether it's with a spouse or just someone we're just getting to know, whatever it is. He does a really good job, especially in this song, of bringing all of that confusion and insanity that love brings with it sometimes to the surface.
Yeah, I think another thing that I kind of get from this verse, besides all of what we've already talked about, is that I kind of get a sense that even, let's say it doesn't work. Let's say his pleading or getting down on his knees doesn't work, and she still goes after this other person. The line, "Sure as there's a sun, I'm going to be the one," kind of tells me that he feels like he's going to hold this torch for her regardless if she leaves him. And and he may have the confidence, like, okay, if you feel like you need another lover for whatever reason, through your reasons, and I've tried to convince you that doing that isn't going to give you what you need, but you still need to do it. You need to go try this new thing out with this new person. But when that fails, and when you don't get from that person what you need or what I give you, I will still be here. Sure as the sun, I will still be here, and I will be the one.
Oh, I like
kind of
that.
get a little bit of that. I kind of get a little bit that he's kind of telling her, like, I get it. I don't like it, and I'm desperately trying to convince you not to do it. But if you feel like you need to, I will still be here when you come running back. Because
you will come running back.
You will come running back.
Yes, I've never thought of it that way, but I think that's brilliant that you would point that out, that he's like, listen, okay, all right, fine. You're going to do what you're going to do. So, okay, but I'm going to be here. And, again, there's that confidence, but also that vulnerability of being like, I'm in, but kind of on my terms. So you do what you need to do and then come back.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's not happy. he's not happy about the situation. He's not happy that he's being asked to or like feel like he's been put in the situation where he has to convince this woman or that they were meant for each other, and all the things that the good times that they've experienced. What is causing this? I truly do feel like in this song he feels like really confused as to what the reasons behind it are. And, there might be an alternate song out there from her perspective, like, okay, well, let me tell you why I need another lover, buddy. And then if you correct some of these things, because people are sometimes very blind to their own faults. They don't even see them as faults at times. But anyway, that's reading maybe a little more into the song than it needs to. So, anything else on the second verse, Rhonda?
No, I think we've had a great conversation about the second verse, and I can't wait to go and listen to it again with different ears now that we've had this conversation.
Yeah, it's the, as we've kind of alluded to, it is definitely the standout verse in the song, and really because of the lyrics and the way it's performed, I think makes it very memorable.
Definitely.
So then he repeats the chorus: "You need another lover like you need a hole in your head. There ain't no other that can do the duty in your bed. So low, so low." So I don't know if I always assumed he was saying so low, like two different words, but the lyrics that I'm reading say solo, solo. I don't know. I'm not going to apply too much meaning to it either way. I don't know if you ever thought of it at all. I'd give you an opportunity to speak to it, but if not, we'll move on.
I haven't. I've always assumed that it was solo, just the word solo, because then, of course, in the extended version, it goes into the Eric Leeds section, which isn't necessarily a solo because it's with Atlanta. But, it more or less, it's kind of this interesting musical break. And even on the studio version, we get a little bit of a musical break there. But no, I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of a lyrical melodic placeholder of some sort. Who knows? I don't think that there's anything real deep with that section.
No, I don't either. That's why I didn't really apply much. I didn't make much of an effort to try to decipher a meaning out of there. So anyway, so then you said there's a musical break here, and then we get to the point in the song where you have kind of like a lot of the music kind of goes away, and it's just you've got the bass guitar, and it's really just Prince and Susanna singing the lines with spaces in between to allow more music to be added in or to come up in the mix. You need another lover like you need a hole in your head, hole in your head, hole in your head. So they repeat that. And I like the part where you need another lover like you need a hole, a hole, a hole, a hole. Mm-hmm. That part's fun. The part's fun to sing. But then the song, the outro, and this is another part that I never really spent a lot of time thinking about, because by the time the song starts to fade out, you're kind of already like coming down from it, and you're not really, at least speaking for myself, I don't really try to glean much meaning from lines that are being sung or spoken during the fade out, because I always figure if they're saying something in a fade out, it needs to be pretty damn compelling for me to even be able to hear it and try to strain to hear it. But he says there's going to be a riot if you don't clap your hands. If you don't make that funky stand, everybody, there ain't no other. So, again, like the solo, I don't think that there's much of a connection between these lines spoken in the outro and basically the overarching theme of the song. There's going to be a riot if you don't clap your hands. I mean, that's just something you might say, like, if you're trying to get the crowd when you're performing on stage to basically get off your asses and participate, in the event that is this performance. So, did you ever think anything beyond it just being kind of like a fun extension of get up and dance?
Well, so what's interesting is that I have always been confused. Well, not confused, but intrigued by that tag at the end. It's going to be a riot. Because one, it's like, now what does that have to do with the conversation we were just having about our relationship, sir?
Exactly.
Like, wait. So now we're rioting? Wait, what? But I think from a musical perspective, it's to your point, it's an invitation for everyone to dance. It's bringing back that last bit of, there ain't no other. It's bringing that last bit back in. So it's more of a musical cue than it is narrative. But it's still kind of like an interesting thing to put there, considering that there hasn't been anything else in the song that is directive in terms of whether he's talking to the band in his head or in the studio with him, what have you, or talking to the listener. You compare that to a song like Housequake, where he's telling you what we're going to do. We're going to show you what to do, put your foot on the rock, all of that. And that is meant to be a collaborative engagement. Like everybody's supposed to dance at the same time. Everyone's supposed to be doing the same moves. But this is not that kind of a song. So to have that at the end, it definitely feels like, okay, now we're just going to get into the groove of this. Now, it's a little bit more meta. I'm coming out of my storyteller space and I'm going back into my, musician space. And now I'm just going to get funky. So I don't think that it doesn't feel like it has any direct relationship to the song's storyline, but more so
feels disconnected.
Yeah. But yet it works. There's so many things that I notice, and that I know that other people who have listened to Prince's music as much as we have noticed, that technically don't necessarily make sense, but they work. And that also goes even just for the way he composes. I have the sheet music for this song, and I've, played around with it on guitar. And it's really interesting because there's a lot of blues in this song. It's a pretty straightforward, I think it's in C major, but then he throws stuff in there that, in theory, shouldn't be there or doesn't technically belong there, but it works beautifully and it gives the song even more depth sonically. And I think this is just another one of those things where he's like, put this here. I feel like nothing Prince ever did was accidental or random. So it's intentional for him, but what that intention was, we don't know, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think those of us who are in the know about Prince's 12-inch versions of his songs can think and try to think to ourselves, okay, it's fading out now, but I bet if I was listening to the 12-inch, this is where the jam would kick back in, you know, and we would get another 3, 4, or in the case of Mountains, another like 15 minutes of of groove.
That Mountains, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's like it's its own thing.
It never ends, which is great. No. But then it's like, no, wait. And you know where he also does that on the "I Wish You Heaven" extended remix. It's like this song goes on a long time.
Yeah, Anotherloverholenyohead is
a lot of time here.
is nowhere near as long as some of those other 12 inches. But bottom line is, like, I think of that a lot, but that's only because I've heard the 12-inch versions, and I know that they exist, and I know that there's a 7+ minute version of this song, and so I just immediately think the song fades out here, and he's starting to kind of talk about, you know, getting into, clap your hands and make a funky stand, and this is where I envision this is where the song continues on then for another 3 minutes or so. And they just had to cut it off here. So it's just kind of like, it feels disconnected. It feels like it doesn't fit. But at the same time, if you were jamming the 12-inch, it would be no big deal. You know, we wouldn't even be really, just be another kind of like the conclusion of one half of the song and the extension of the rest of it. Like, we're ending the narrative now. Let's just jam out the rest of the song. All right, so that brings us to the end of Anotherloverholenyohead. So, yeah, I mean, I think we covered it. Did you have any final thoughts on the song or anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about now, Rhonda?
Oh my gosh, I don't think so. I mean, again, like I said earlier, it's one of my favorite songs. Interestingly, it is not my favorite song on the Parade album. That would be Mountains, which
same
makes me smile every time it comes on. And just tangentially, not long after Prince passed, maybe the night that he died, there was an impromptu dance party at a club in San Francisco called the Makeout Room, and we were all crunched up in there together. And I remember the DJ putting Mountains on, and I just started bawling. But it was like happy tears. Like, it was a terrible moment, but it was like, okay, I think we're going to survive. But this song, Anotherloverholenyohead, the other thing that I love about it is the way that he titled it. I think that it would have been so just like everybody else to just name the song Another Space Lover and leave it there. The other thing that I find to be interesting is that on the Plectrum Electrum album, he covered Alice Smith's song, Another Love. And I discovered quite interestingly a few years ago that, you know, for whatever reason, my iPod would play those two songs back to back. It would sometimes do this thing where it's playing things in alphabetical order, even though I always have it on shuffle. And it's a really interesting listen to listen to Anotherloverholenyohead and then go into the Alice Smith cover, because the songs are very similar, and Prince's approach in that second song is very similar. It's almost like he took someone else's song and revisited a notion that he had many, 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 many years before. So throwing that out there in case anyone wants to have that listening experience, check it out. But no, otherwise, I think we've covered the lyrics for Anotherloverholenyohead. It's a phenomenal song, and whether it's the studio version, you know, the original album version, or the remix, it's just a badass song.
Mm-hmm. It is. Parade's a great album. This is a great penultimate track, and while it wasn't a big hit from a pop perspective, as I've said before, in 2021, who gives a shit? You're right. I mean, it doesn't matter how a song performed on the pop charts in 1986 anymore. Songs are not. So it only matters from the perspective of who really knows it, because everybody knows Kiss. I mean, that's the song off this album that really transcended just regular pop success. It's in our popular culture, and it will be forever. And I'm not saying that Another Lover Hole in Your Head needs to be at the same level as Kiss. I can see why it never will be. But, the only thing that about it not having a lot of success on the charts means is that there's a lot of people who aren't as knowledgeable on Prince's discography as you or I that have never heard this song. And it just would be nice if more people would, because it's a great song, and I think people would like it.
It's an amazing song. And it's surprising to me, because it was released as a single, it's surprising to me that it didn't receive more airplay, because I can hear this song on R&B radio. And the fact that I do not ever recall hearing it on the radio, though. Now, granted, that was 30-something years ago, so maybe it was on the radio, but I don't remember it, and I listened to the radio a lot. And it had a video that was in heavy rotation for a nice little minute. So the fact that the song didn't really do anything, even, not necessarily charting, but that it just didn't seem to have gotten the same level of attention as Kiss and When Doves Cry and so forth is something to consider, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of music, Rhonda, so before we go, would you mind telling the listeners where people can find your music, if you'd like?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much. So I am everywhere. I have an EP that just came out in December called Home. That was inspired by the events of 2020, and that I actually wrote in my childhood bedroom. I spent about a month back home in Dallas at the beginning of the pandemic and wrote some new music and decided to make an album about that experience, or, just the feelings that were happening around that time. It along with my dance EP, Radical Ecstasy, that came out last spring, and my 2010 debut EP, Nuda Veritas. Everything is available on Bandcamp, on Apple Music, on Spotify, on Tidal, pretty much everywhere. So whatever you like to stream or wherever you like to discover, I'm there. My website is rhondanicole.com, and you can find not only my music on my website and links to it, but also my social handles.
Awesome. Well, I am very pleased that you have agreed to be my guest, because you've been a wonderful guest. And
thank you.
I appreciate your insight, appreciate your time, and I wanted to thank you for that. Also, I wanted to tell everybody, the listeners, that, you can find the podcast, the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, just about everywhere. I really think that it's pretty much on just about every podcasting platform that exists. You can check out my blog at pressrewind.net. I try to write up a little bit about different songs that I've covered over the past. I'm playing some catch up, so I'm a little behind. I'm not to the Parade era yet, but I'm at least up to Dirty Mind era as of March of 2021. So please check that out. I'd appreciate it. I try to put links to the different episodes and whatever kind of fun little bootlegs or original versions of songs that exist out there. I've got a nice little collection of live versions that I like to share with people. So just check it out if you have a chance. And until next time, my name is Jason Brenninger, and enjoy the show, enjoy Rhonda's music, and enjoy Another Lover Hole in Your Head. Goodbye.